in the name of Deputy Éamon Cuív, the Minister for Housing, Planning and Local Government, to discuss the recent report on traveller halting sites and group housing in Galway City and County. Deputy has 4 minutes to make an initial statement. Minister will similarly have time to reply. Deputy Cuív.
I'd like to thank the Minister for coming in here today and listening to what I have to say. Now, I have to say, we get reports and reports, but the report prepared by the travelling community on an analysis of all of the sites and group housing in County Galway and Galway City is absolutely devastating in what it says. It's so clear, and the pictures tell as much as 1,000 words. And basically, Minister, a lot of travellers are living in Galway in third world conditions, on sites provided publicly that are not maintained, some of which don't have planning permission, or one at least of which doesn't have planning permission, one that is totally overcrowded to the point that it contravenes the laws, and we all know what happened in Dublin in that regard. And to be quite honest, I despair at the inability, particularly of Galway City Council, to deal with this issue. And I support the call from the traveller community that there is a need for a complete overhaul of the traveller accommodation planning system. I believe that looking for Part 8s, looking to work it through the system we've worked, has failed to deliver year in, year out. And that there's a need for a specialist agency, independent of the local authority, or at the very, very least that we move away from councillors voting the planning through for traveller-specific accommodation, and that all such plannings would be referred directly, at least in the short term, to Bord Pleanála. I think it's also fair to say that we've become a country of reports, thinking that reports, laws, big statements solve problems. But the local traveller accommodation consultative committees produce a lot of paper, but very, very few results. To put it bluntly, the political will is not there. I think the figures of how travellers live are absolutely devastating. 7,000 travellers, nearly 1 in 4 in the country, were either sharing houses or bays, living in unauthorised halting sites in 2016. We know, for example, in Galway that a totally disproportionate number of the homeless are travellers, not through any fault of their own. They're the finest people that are into me every week, but because we're not providing the accommodation. As you know, you had a ridiculous situation in the summer of 2017 where Galway City Council threatened to evict travellers out of Cooltraw halting site because it was overcrowded, and yet had nowhere for them to go. So it was either move as told to somewhere illegal or stay where you were. It's out of the frying pan into the fire. There are many more specific examples. One that I've often quoted is the example of the halting site out in Carrabrown. And I fought and worked to get that as a temporary expedient because the travellers were living on the road. It was only meant to be a temporary expedient. It was only a temporary halting site. 3 years planning was given, then a year's planning were given by Bord Pleanála. They absolutely scarified Galway City Council. But notwithstanding that, to my knowledge, they have not been taken to court by Galway County Council, in whose jurisdiction this particular facility is, for total breach of planning, nor have any plans been made to provide suitable long-term accommodation for the traveller families that deserve a lot better than to be placed beside a redundant dump.
Thank you, Deputy. And Talis Dodge.
Thanks, Oireachtas. I want to thank Deputy Cuív for raising this very, very important issue and bringing the focus to it. And I also want to thank him for his openness to change in this area, to try to bring some progress to traveller-specific accommodation that is quite simply is not happening in many places. And Galway probably is the best example, and that report summarises and covers it and highlights it as best it possibly can. But as the Deputy knows, I've been down to many of those sites myself, and I've been aware, I'm very aware of the difficulties in relation to on those sites and the overcrowded situation and the very, very, as you call them, third-world conditions, but they're deplorable conditions. And it's not good enough, and it's not acceptable. And we have to somehow, this has to be addressed and has to be changed. So I have been provided with a copy of the report by the Galway Traveller Movement, the organisation that produced the report and put a lot of work into it. And I genuinely want this, want progress and change, and this has gone on for a long, long number of years, and we have to move it on. I was pleased to have had the opportunity to open the Irish Traveller Movement annual conference last November and to speak to travellers in Galway, from Galway, and from other parts of the country as well, and to hear their accounts of how they've bared poor accommodation for a long number of years, and all the issues they have firsthand. And I've met some of the families and visited their homes and their sites. And you're right, the conditions are just not acceptable. It's as simple as that. There's no sugarcoating in any other shape or form. So I have witnessed some family situations firsthand, have been visiting a number of traveller sites since taking up my role in the department, and deeply aware of the challenges facing travellers and local authorities in the provision of safe, culturally appropriate housing options for families, not just in Galway but throughout the country. And again, some local authorities do take the responsibility seriously and do want to move on. Others are lacking behind, but the system is failing, and there's no other way of putting that. It should be noted that in accordance with the Housing Travel Accommodation Act 1998, housing authorities have statutory responsibility for the assessment of the accommodation needs of travellers and the preparation, adoption and implementation of multi-annual traveller accommodation programmes, TAPs, in their areas. Local authorities are currently preparing their 5th multi-annual TAPs, which will run from 2019 to 2024. This will outline details of the programme to be undertaken to meet the existing and projected accommodation needs of travellers in their areas and the responsibility of local authorities to deliver. The TAPs will be prepared by local authorities in consultation with local traveller organisations, local traveller consultative committees, the LTACCs and other relevant community groups and the public in general. And they'll come into effect in September of this year. It was felt that it would make sense to bring them in conjunction with the new council, so there'll be ownership there, as opposed to having something finalised before a local election and then nothing happening there afterwards as well. Notwithstanding this, identifying solutions to challenges in the provision of travel accommodation generally is a responsibility shared by all stakeholders, and a responsibility that has to be taken seriously. In line with the commitment Rebuilding Ireland and reflecting the disappointing level of overall funding drawdown, certainly in recent years, and having regard also to relevant findings in relation to the European Social Charter referred to, the Housing Agency commissioned a review of funding for travel-specific accommodation in 2017. This review had regard to the targets contained in the local authority TAPs and actual delivery, and we can see that over the last 20 years there's a delivery of less than 80%, in some years less than 60%, and last year less than 50%. So it's well documented that it's not where it should be in terms of delivering. So the money has been provided, and the budget is gradually going back up to what it should be as well over the last couple of years, having suffered cuts as well. But even the money was there, it's not been spent, and we have the evidence there to show that as well. Following the consideration of the review, the National Travel Accommodation Consultative Committee, which are the advisory body for me under the legislation, recommended and asked me to set up that an independent expert group be established to examine and make recommendations on issues regarding travel accommodation policy, strategy and implementation. And I accept the Deputy doesn't like new reports and more reports, but in this case they wanted it, and I think it's a view to try and move this on. A lot longer than should have taken. We took to set up that expert panel. They did come together, and we did get them established in September. They had their first meeting in October, and I asked them to report to me as quickly as they possibly can with their review and their recommendations. And what they've been asked to do, if I give a little bit of time, Chair, they've been asked to review the effectiveness, the implementation and the operation of the Housing Accommodation Act 1998, with a view to examining whether it provides a robust legislative basis for meeting the current and future accommodation needs of traveller communities. It has also been asked to review other legislation that may impact on the provision of delivery of traveller-specific accommodation, including transient accommodation, which will address a number of the issues raised by the European Committee on Social Rights and certainly by a number of individual people in Galway and Cork and so on as well. So I expect the group will report to our department no later than April. And I've asked, and I've been very clear with them, to make whatever recommendations they think are needed. And they've been given no instructions to come back with me with small changes. I've asked them whatever it takes to try to fix this once and for all. So we're prepared to do that as a department. And I would ask that we get political cooperation on that issue too. And in fairness, the Housing Committee here have met the expert panel as well and have bought into that process too. And hopefully we'll have the report on our desk in April at the latest, so we can try and take some action as well, because like the Deputy, I share the frustration of what's happened in the system over the last number of years, so hopefully we'll be in a stronger position after that as well. And also, as part of that, separate to that, we've set up a new task force for Galway City and County to try to, and the overall social housing provision, which includes travel accommodation, to try and drive on activity here, because we can see that the targets are way underachieved there. So we are determined to try to address this as best we possibly can.
Thank you, Minister. Cuív.
Minister, I know your heart's in the right place. But it's reports and words, words, words. The system creates always another report, another examination, another consultation before we take action. And to put it bluntly, particularly if I might say so in Galvay City, it's game, set, match to the status quo, do nothing. Because reality is the Part 8s aren't going through. So we can have all the reports we want in the world, but nothing is happening, Minister. Now, you know that time flies very fast in the job you're in. And you have one very short window of opportunity ever to get something done. Or you go out with another report on your desk, but no action. Carabrown temporary site, Headford Road, example of Galway. There are 15 families living on the temporary halting site in Carabrown. 30 adults and 36 children are currently living on the site. The families are living on this site since 2009, when 3-year planning temporary was given. The 15 families have stated a need for traveller-specific, culturally appropriate accommodation. Galway City Council has not been able to meet this need and has applied for an extension of the planning permission of this site. They did a good few years ago, 2012. In December 2013, and Board Plan Ola gave them exactly 1 year. That ran out in December 2014. The Council didn't even try. In the 10 years that these people have been living on a site given as an absolute crisis expedient, they haven't tried to give or to get a proper, long-term, suitable, high-quality accommodation. The accommodation issues, rats, mice and fly infestation, and don't blame it on the travellers, it's beside, as I said, a disused dump. Rats found in belongings in sinks, showers, food presses and other parts. Flies are constant for the same reason. It's also beside a recycling place. Windows and doors cannot be opened. Sewage and sanitation. Pipe for sinks, showers, washing machines constantly blocked up. Toilets constantly blocked up. Water and sewage comes up over the ground and through the bays. Electricity and heating. Electricity erratic goes off and leaving families without power. Structural hazards. Sheds provide a health hazard. Falling apart, holes, cracks in ceilings and walls. Windows broken, locks and doors, sorry, and thanks for your indulgence, Chair. Steel doors like prison doors. To be quite honest, it's more a case for Ireland Aid, you'd think. And that's replicated in various places. It's more a description of what you'll be talking about for Ireland Aid than what should be available in what should be a first world country. Minister, we need action now. As I said, there's one very simple thing that needs to be done. We need some way of getting the plannings through to provide the alternative accommodation. And people have an absolute human right to live in decent conditions.
Thank you, Deputy.
Thanks, Oireachtas, and again, thank Deputy Cuív. But I think it's clear to me and many others that we needed action for a long number of years. And some of these sites I've been on have been in troubled spots for 20 or 30 years and gone on a long, long time. I can only act within the law that's there, and that legislation was brought in. That was brought in good faith in '98. I accept that the Housing Act was there. In conjunction with the various travel representative bodies, I was asked to set up this expert group to bring about recommendations to change this system once and for all. That's a process I put in place and determined that when we get that report that we'll act on it, but I have to wait until I get it. And yes, there's actions that have to happen there, and it'll bring a lot of stakeholders on board as well. hopefully, and that we've had cross-party support for that document so far from the Housing Committee. So I would hope that either I or whoever's in my job in the future will implement the change that recommends, because we do need to address this. But there's only one way to do it, and that's to go through the challenge we've gone through, which is bring everybody with us in this, because I'm not holding one particular sector responsible for this, but it hasn't happened, and it hasn't happened for a long time. So we'll take the expert panel report when we get it, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, and we'll act on it then. And that's the best we can do with that, because, and hopefully as well as that, in the situation to Galway, different to other counties, we will have our task force set up now as well, under the chairmanship of Geraldine Tallon, who's brought about great change and success in Cork, working with the two local authorities there. So I'm hoping that that will also drive some success in Galway, so we can get more of the money spent to improve the conditions people are living in there, as well as provide some new accommodation for people.
Thank you, Minister.